Welcome, friends. Thank you for joining us this day in the study of the book of Hebrews. We're studying this morning the 7th chapter, a pivotal chapter as far as the book is concerned, and deals with one of the most critical thoughts that faced the Hebrew that had become Christians and were now tempted to turn back to the law. Well, that's what the book of Hebrews was. It was written to encourage those that had become that were Jews and had turned from the law of Moses to be obedient to Christ. But through weakness, through different things, many of them were being tempted to go back to the law. In the first part of the chapter, the apostle has spoken already of Christ, a priest after the order of Melchizedek. And he introduced Melchizedek and showed that he was a one of a kind, that Abraham met him as he returned from the slaughter of the kings, that Abraham was blessed by Melchizedek, and that Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek, all which indicate that Melchizedek was higher than Abraham. Now, as we look at the second part of the chapter, we're going to look and see that there is a point made that is a very important point. And that is that the writer said if there was perfection through the Levitical priesthood, what need was there that another priest should arise that was not after the order of Aaron or Levi? And the point he makes is a valid point, because the point that's been pointed out already in the chapter, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, and mentioned otherwise, and perhaps will be mentioned later, was a promise that was made by David while that Levitical priesthood was serving and would serve for another 1,000 years. But if there was perfection through it, if it offered everything that the worshiper needed, then there would have been no need for another priesthood to have been brought into focus. But he added that, and because he added it, and he speaks of a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, then that not only showed the imperfection of the Levitical priesthood, but it also necessitated that there was a change of the law, because the priesthood being changed, there was made of necessity a change of the law. When we look at the priesthood being changed, we know that under the law, one served as a priest because he was of the family of Aaron, a descendant, fleshly descendant of his. But when the writer during that time spoke of that priesthood, but then spoke of another priesthood coming, and one that would be a priest forever, then there is something that necessitated that the law had to be changed if that priest was to function, because it is evident that our Lord, who was that one that was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, our Lord did not come from Levi. He came from Judah, touching which tribe Moses never spake anything in regard to priest. And so we find that because the law was changed, or the covenant was changed, and the priesthood was changed, then that covenant, that law had to be changed. And when we look at that point, the writer teaches that the Levitical priesthood was disannulled. That is, it was invalidated because of its weakness and profitableness. And the Hebrew writer makes that point. He says there is a disannulling of a foregoing commandment because of its weakness and unprofitability, and the bringing in of a better hope through which we draw nigh unto God. We're going to look and see at the conclusion of this chapter just exactly what it was that made that priesthood a much better one. And yet, as we look, there was this disannulling. This law could not make one perfect. And it had to be repeated again and again and again. And not only was that true, but that first priesthood was that was shown to be lesser than the priesthood of Melchizedek, because The priesthood of Melchizedek was one that was confirmed with an oath. And the priesthood of those that served unto Aaron were those that were made priests without an oath. And the writer said that he was made a priest, not after the order of a carnal commandment, but by virtue of the power of an endless life. And this is the point. When he speaks of a carnal commandment, friend, he doesn't mean something wicked, as sometimes we think. We speak of persons being carnal-minded. That does not mean necessarily, as far as this point is concerned, that he's wicked-minded. Rather, it means carnal has to do with the flesh. And one that was a priest under that first priesthood was after a carnal commandment. A man physically had to be one that was born of the seed of Aaron. But that's the carnal commandment. But this priesthood was that was ordained not upon the fact that a person was physically a descendant of Aaron, but it was made on the power of an endless life. Christ was a priest forever. There was none that served as priest in his order before him. There was none that would serve as priest after him. He is a priest forever. And he provides sufficiently all the things that mankind needs. For, as we've seen, there was that doing away because that law was weak and unprofitable. Christ has become the surety of a better covenant, the writer says. So as we look, as we see him talking about Christ, he says that Christ is the surety of a better covenant and one by which we draw nigh unto God through him. He is the surety of a better covenant. And by that means he's the guarantor of a better covenant. More things can be promised and given under the covenant of Christ than under the law of Moses. He is sufficient. Under the first covenant, those priests had to first offer sacrifices for themselves and then for the sins of the people. But Christ, the record says, also offered sacrifice, but he didn't offer sacrifice for his sins, for he had no sin. And that was the mass difference between Christ and those that were priests after the order of Melchizedek. As we're looking at the conclusion of that statement, notice the sufficiency of Jesus Christ. For such a high priest became us, who was holy, guileless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and made higher than the heavens, who need him not daily, like those high priests, to offer up sacrifices first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. For this he did once for all, when he offered up himself. For the law appointed men high priests having infirmities. But the law that appointed Christ as a priest was that perfected, or offered one that was perfected forevermore. We have such an high priest. Jesus is our high priest and deserves to benefit and to offer sacrifices or to serve in your stead and in my stead. We need to look to him for those sacrifices he makes and worship him for the power that's contained within it. Thank you, friends, and may God bless you and yours.